Hello and welcome to Clay to Canopy, the show where I attempt to make just about everything from the ground up. This video is part of a series, so if you are not subscribed, please do so now so that you will be informed with all of the latest content that I have. So we are now here in part 3 of this Victorian Cat House series. Yes, I know, crazy how long this series is taking, but this basically took me about 2 months to build, so a lot of content to cram into these 3 short videos. For this one, we're going to start off with the roof. I just traced an outline and then gave myself about an extra inch around the rim so that I would have a slight overhang, cut that piece of plywood to use as my base piece, and then went from there. So I just have some foam board here that I'm going to be making triangles with. And these triangles will be scored and curved to begin forming the rounded top peak of the roof. To help with the bend, I'm just going to score, and I'm basically just cutting through the top layer of paper and not all the way through the board. That'll give me enough flex to get my bend, and then I need to round over this side. So what I did was I just placed it on the edge of a very large planter that I have, trace line, and then cut the curve. As I cut these, I'm going to start attaching them with some hot glue. Be holding this quite a while because it's really hot today. It'll be hot enough to melt this glue on its own. So I'm going to just keep repeating this process as I build it up and cutting pieces that fit in so that I can build the point here. I have completed the foam structure for the turret. If I was going to actually be making this some sort of functioning woodworking piece, then this foam piece would become my mold and I would build an actual wood structure, probably coated in plastic, and then just use it as a functioning mold. But in this case, it is going to be fine to be the understructure, and I'm going to just go ahead and shingle the way it is. So I just went and I printed out some stained glass patterns that I found on the internet for free. A couple of them I doctored because I wanted one to be a lizard. I have my acrylic sheets here, and I'm going to be using the glues and the paints on the top side of the section where it says non-glare, because the non-glare actually is textured. That little bit of texture will help grab the paint. For the glue, all I did was mix in a 2-ounce bottle of black acrylic paint into my white school glue, and I just dumped out some of the white school glue to make sure that I have enough to fit into the bottle, and then shook it all up. What I have now is a medium to just basically make piping that looks like leading for stained glass. Found that instruction on the Joann's website. Now I'm just going to cut my pattern here. And then I'm going to be taping this pattern to the underside, you know, the non-glare side. When I did the printout for the actual windows, this guy here is just my sample. I went ahead and I made sure that I left a little bit of a border edge so that my image sits just slightly inside of the acrylic. So basically I could just tape directly around it and I was good to go. My sample here is a little bit too large, but I just wanted to show you what the steps were to do this, since I did this basically sitting in front of the couch. Now I'm going to take my school glue, and it's handy to have a little bit of scrap something to do your testing. I will say that this is not the cleanest of applications coming out of this glue bottle. So you just kind of go in, and you see what I mean, that it's a little hard to control. This does need to dry overnight, but the good news is that once this flattens out and dries, it's very easy to come in with an X-Acto knife and clean up any of the excess lines that you're not happy with. Probably could leave your glue container open and let it dry out a little bit to thicken the glue. And maybe, you know, don't go with the cheaper craft paint, because the cheaper the craft paint is, the thinner it tends to be. Once that was done, I set this aside, let it dry overnight, cleaned it up, and then went in with my nail polish and painted out all of this pattern with the nail polish. Be careful not to try and go over the lines of the glue. I opted for using my own brushes and getting really close with a small brush. So for this roof, I'm just going to use a piece of my foam core to make a template. This will be translated into wood. I'm going to measure 3 inches off of here because that's how high I want the roof to be. Alright, so this is the side profile. I want the roof to come in at an angle here. So this is the template piece that I need for here. So I can go ahead and cut that out of wood. I'll do the same thing with that one. And then that will give me the angle I need to follow for the piece that sits here. I don't want to glue this with the hot glue because I need to use these parts as my template for the wood. So I'm just using this glue tape to stick it on. This one looks like it's going to be just fine. I'll move on to doing that last one, which is this guy. Alright, templates for the roofs are done. So the next move, I will be taking these apart and then cutting these all out of some really thin 1/8 inch thick plywood and then glue those up together. And then from there, it's time to just start applying some more shingle. As I pull these down, I'm going to number all of the parts in chalk or letter them just so that I can keep track of everything. Hi, what you doing? You causing trouble? Start out tracing these, but then I'll use a straight edge to go back and make sure my lines are nice and clean. I'm just going to go ahead and super glue this thing together because I think that's my best option. That looks pretty good. Alright, just going to run some super glue along the seams just to make sure they're all good. Alright, so I decided to change some things up a bit, and I'm going to go with a thin veneer for my application of the siding. I gave myself a 1/2 inch border because over on the roof I'm going to be screwing and gluing a block to the top of the roof so that I can then go ahead and just sink this into the roof part. So once these are on, this is all going to become one big attachment to the whole roof, and I can remove the top lid and these will come off fully attached to the roof. So last night I took a bunch of my scrap veneer to create all of these strips here, and these strips are going to get staggered and stacked. They have design details on the edges of them. What I have used to do them is I have a bunch of these. They are just craft scissors with all different types of profile edging. You want to get really strong ones because in order to make sure that you cut into the wood properly and it doesn't shear or have any of the splintering, you gotta get the good quality ones. I took some of my scrap pieces and I applied tape to it. Now the blue tape is going to help, hold all of the pieces together, and even if there is a bit of shredding where it splits and breaks, the blue tape is hold all of that in. So I have the blue tape attached, and then I'm going to do some measuring here. I'm just measuring the halfway point of this tape. This tape is not quite 1.5 inches. I just pick my edger of choice and use that to cut along the line. Some of the more intricate styles take a little more doing. You have to kind of match up where the last cut was. As you can see, it took me quite a bit of time last night, so this was a nice activity to do. I'm just sitting in front of the TV. And once I had this one, I then just took a straight pair of scissors and had a straight cut along the back edge of that. And then it gave me this nice profile border here that I can use up against my roof. So when I go ahead and start laying these down, I'm going to end up getting this kind of pattern happening. So that is the next plan, and I'm going to get moving on getting that going. I have to remove this tape because the glue won't actually hold it on there if I don't pull the tape off. I've done some smaller pieces where I left the tape on, but this scale is going to require the glue to make full contact with the wood. I am going to apply a strip of tape, kind of hold it down, and by the time I do all 3 sides, I should be able to pull this tape off. So I've completed the work on the 2 little roof sections here. And I am now moving on to dealing with the rounded section of the roof. I'm gonna go in and reinforce this entire thing with a couple layers of thin veneer. So what I've done here is I've just taken a piece of my veneer scraps, bent it around here, and then picked triangular shoots to draw a line on, and then cut out a triangle from those pieces, which is what I have right here. And what I wanted was to get it to overlap over the seam lines of where these bits join. I'm gonna just apply some glue and get cracking applying these pieces. I'm happy to report that I have only glued my hands to the roof once in the entire process of attaching these things, so yeah, that's a bonus. The first layer I threw on hodgepodge, but this next layer I'm going to apply in fuller strips, much like the way I applied the initial film. I didn't mention this earlier, but I'm trying to run my grain vertically because if I was to try and run it across, it's going to want to break and crack. Running it vertically is where the flex happens. Next, I began to apply my shingling. After going around the entire thing with small rectangular pieces, I cut a point with my snippers to get a more dramatic look for the rest of the shingling. Alright you guys, so the roof is done. So now it's time to basically put all of the finishing touches on this piece. And so for the remainder of this finish up job, which is just some painting and some little detail work, I am just going to go ahead and work and just take some footage as I'm going through the process. just want to take a moment to remind you guys to please subscribe, because this base of this house, I'm actually going to do a completely different demo in the future of how to build a cat tree. That's why I'm not going into too much detail on this guy, but definitely make sure you're subscribed so that when I do put that video out, you will have access to it. Alright, you guys, I know that she may look complete, but no Victorian house would be complete without accessories. I'm going to move on to making some accessories, some portraits, and a rug, and probably a chandelier. Yeah, so that's what's next. Okay, so I am going to make a braided rug, an early Victorian style of rug that was basically a common everyday use item. And I have this book here, miniature embroidery for the Victorian dollhouse. So yeah, here we go. This yarn right here that I have is way too thin. I braided each one of these individually to make them a little bit thicker, because I just started a small amount of this rope with pre-braided pieces. So first thing I'm going to do is measure out something that I think is manageable in length. So I have 3 strands. I'm going to knot this, and then I just have a baby pressure clamp. And I'm just going to tie this onto this guy and attach it to my house here. Alright, and with that knotted down on that end, I have all this free reign to come here and start my braiding. Braiding is just, you know, every other one, over. I'm going to go ahead and do this to this yarn, and then I will repeat this with the frilly blue yarn that I have. Now that I have my 2 braided pieces, I'm going to go ahead and unravel. These are going to all be braided together. I'm going to go ahead and take my ends, and now I'm going to be incorporating the twine, not all 3 of these together. I'm going to retie this new one around one of my clamps again, 1 loop over. That way when I go to take it off, it's going to be much easier. I get this rigged up over here again. Now I'm just going to repeat the braiding step this time using these 3 strands. Alright, so I've selected an embroidery hoop the size that I knew would fit inside the house, and I'm just got a piece of muslin here. Install the muslin onto the embroidery hoop. I have some really thick thread, and then I have some tapestry needles, so I'm just going to use one of these needles. And I'm going to bleed my thread, and bleeding your thread basically makes it so that it doesn't get all tangly and wrinkly like this is. And to bleed your thread, you just stick a finger in and kind of pull along the way a couple times. And then to tie my knot, I love this method where you just gather your ends here. I lay my needle on top of that end, pinch, wrap the one that's underneath a couple times around your needle, pinch that bit together, and then pull the needle through, and and holding your little knot, boom, instant tie. I have my braided yarn, start in the middle, and I'm actually gonna keep this knot upright. Find somewhere with it eyeballing what's middle you can measure, but I don't. Okay, I pulled my needle through. I'm gonna give myself a little bit of room here, and I am gonna just stick this through. Now I'm gonna be creating a giant knot here in the middle just to get this yarn good and down so that I could clip off my knot and not have to worry about seeing it. So I'm just gonna go in back and forth up through the embroidery hoop. And then I'm gonna go through, so I'm actually piercing through the yarn braid. Alright, once I feel like that is good and down, I can either untie my knot or clip the knot off. I'm just going to try and untie it. It'll give me a little bit more room to play with. Okay, with my knot undone, tuck it under itself and get that good and secured. Just have my thumb on top of it, trying to keep it pressed down. I'm just going to keep piercing through the middle until I feel confident that it's secured down. I am going to trim my excess fabric. Now that the middle is secure, I can begin laying this rope around itself, and I'll be stitching it down and in place. I'm just going to take a little bit of the outside edge, stitch it down, then move over a couple little braids. Basically, this is the process I'm going to be going until I keep going all the way around until this entire surface is filled up. I finished up this one cording, and I don't want to keep this knot. I left a little bit of room here for me to work with, and what I'm going to do is apply some super glue to the end of this so that it doesn't fray on me, and I can cut the knot and it will just tuck underneath itself when I go ahead and finish it up. Now, if you don't have super glue, you can buy that no fray stuff and it will work just the same. So I just put a board here so that I don't get any of the super glue dripped onto my muslin. Alright, and I'm just going to apply some of this super glue, spray with Insta-Set. I'm going to give it a second to dry, and then I'm just going to chop off right underneath the knot. And you could do this with your starting end. It makes it easier to tack down. I probably should have done this when I first started, but it was something I thought of after the fact. There we go. I finished the inside circle, and then I went in and I added 2 layers of this rope that I used for the cat scratcher components. I wanted to draw in a little bit of tying it back from the bottom to the top. To finish this off, I still have needle and thread because I'm going to continue going around with this, but before I do that, what I'm going to do now is stitch a border around the edge with a zigzag stitch just to seal the circle so that I can cut off the excess, and it gives me kind of a clean edge to deal with. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it off of the hoop here. Got my sewing machine ready. I'm going to just do basically a locking stitch, and I am just going to run this stitch right around my circle here on the muslin so that I can then cut off my excess. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and then once this is done, we'll get some shots of what it looks like all finished inside of the house. I got a bucket full of these old chandelier parts, and so I'm going to take my little bits of fabric. I'm just going to water down some school glue now that I got my squares cut. Old soup container, an inch of water in it. 2 tablespoons full of glue. I mean, there's really not much of a wrong way to do this. I'm just going to mix it up and lay them over them and let them harden so that I can retain this shape. I'm going to need 2 halves for each one. This is going to be a long process, as usual. Alright, I'm going to begin prepping this rest of the parts of the chandelier, and I have an embroidery hoop that is 7-inch embroidery hoop that I just took out the middle insert of and went and spray painted that gold. While that's drying, I'm going to start cutting up the excess edges on these guys, and the larger stone one I ended up putting bells inside of. I'm probably going to leave a bit of a border so that I can make sure that I don't destroy that connection on the end. I went and I raided my holiday bin and I found this cording stuff. Basically just went and corded these guys, and I just have a 1/8-inch hole punch. What I did was I punched a hole on each side of the large one and one of the small ones, and then took some of this cording, nothing fancy here, just tied a regular knot. Some of these bells don't have the little clappers inside. You have to make sure that it's ringing. Okay, I've got 5 done up. I did make extras because I'm not sure how many I'm going to need visually to see what this looks like. I think the first thing I will do though is figure out my hanging situation. And then from here, I'm going to just tie a knot at the top of each one of these and get them on here. All right, flip this up through. These little guys are going to have their own tutorial, so please keep an eye out for them. Oh, to be a cat in this house. Alright, there's your tour for the inside of the house. Let's take a tour of the outside. Alright you guys, this is all I have for you today. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, share, and subscribe if you have not done so already. And hope to see you soon. Alright, you have a nap. This house is not even finished yet, and these cats are going nuts. You discovered the house now too. Your sister slept in it all day yesterday, and I couldn't get her out. You're gonna fight over the house. Your brother's in the house. Oh boy. Yeah, that's your brother in there. You're angry. This could be bad. It's just your sister. Hey, you guys don't fight.